the scene where they have their fight in his LA apartment, which we shot over 2 days, was the first time I've had that experience as a director where I felt too affected by what was happening in a way that I had to stop. I mean, they were also exhausted. They would have to take breaks anyway, but I had to take breaks because I couldn't judge it. I had to like step away from it. I felt like I was really watching people have this fight.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm Josh Siegel. On behalf of MoMA's Department of Film, welcome to the second night of The Contenders and to this special screening of Marriage Story, which, for my money, is not only one of the best films of the year, but also one of the best films of Noah Baumbach's career, and I hope you'll agree. I want to thank Netflix, not only for tonight's screening, but also for releasing the film in theaters. It gives you an opportunity, it gives you an opportunity not only to recognize, we all know, of course, Noah Baumbach to be an extraordinary screenwriter, but this gives you an opportunity to really understand how good he is as an editor, as a cinematographer, obviously working with the editor and cinematographer, but in terms of just the aesthetic of the film, you really appreciate it in a way that I don't think you necessarily could on a smaller screen. And since Netflix is maybe in the audience, or if you have a direct pipeline to Ted Sarandos, I would beseech Netflix to buy the Paris Theater. And make it a permanent home for their films. In any case, Noah Baumbach is very kindly going to be joining us after the screening for a conversation and for your questions. So we'll see you in a little bit. Enjoy the film. Thank you. Please welcome Noah Baumbach.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience. I decided to dress as Bert Spitz tonight in your honor. But actually, I realized when I saw your film, I always dress like Bert Spitz. So I actually have no idea what that implies about my future or my present.
You've got different shoes, though.
Well, yeah, that's reckless. So I think the burning question we all want to know is, how does Alan Alda's joke end?
Well, it's better when you have Alan Alda to finish it for you, which he will. Well, you remember what we got to in the movie. So it says, don't go to the Vatican, it'll be so crowded. And then, so she goes on the trip, she comes back, the hairdresser says, well, how'd it go? She says, oh, well, it was amazing. When we went in Alitalia, they bumped us up because they were overbooked, and we rode in first class. It was amazing, and yeah, but how about the Hassler, right? I mean, that's like, no, actually, the Hassler was great. The construction had stopped. Again, same problem. They got this amazing room, and it was so beautiful. And you said, well, but I mean, you didn't bother going to the Vatican, did you? Well, we did, and we were on a very long line. Yeah, I told you this would be a very long. We were on a very long line, and then actually somebody came out from the Vatican and said, we're picking some very few people to come meet the Pope personally. And so we came in, and well, and we got to meet the Pope, and the hairdresser says, oh my God, I mean, what did the Pope say? The Pope said, where'd you get that shitty haircut?
I knew I could count on you for a punchline. I wanted to give you an opportunity, because I don't think you're going to have many of them, to say a few words about not the leading supporting actors, but some of the less known ones, because I think they're equally extraordinary. We can talk, of course, about Ray Liotta and Laura Dern and Alan Alda, but maybe I'm going to throw out some names to you, and maybe you could say a few words about each of them and how you even found them. Ozzie Robertson, who plays Henry.
Yeah, well, he's a remarkable kid and actor, and he I mean, that's one of those things. You write a movie like this, and if you don't have the kid, you have nothing. I mean, I knew I reached out to Scarlett and Adam and Laura from the very beginning, even before at the very beginning of writing it. So I knew they were kind of my guides while I was writing it. But the kid, I was bracing myself for a long, nationwide search, which, and I haven't really written a kid with that big a part in a few years because it's a challenge, and it's a challenge logistically when you're shooting because their hours are limited, and but it's also just to find somebody who can work in your movie and bring that kind of natural quality at the same time, can do what's required. And he was, I would say within the first month or so, Doug Abel, who's the casting director, he runs the Vineyard Theater downtown, a great casting director. He brought in Eji, and I sort of almost doubted how good he could be because it was too early in my mind. But I brought Adam in, and Adam played with him and did the scenes with him, and we did a thing where we kind of did a scene and we crunched up a piece of paper, and Adam and him threw it back and forth like it was a ball while they were talking, and he could do that thing which, I mean, frankly, all great actors of any age do, which is both be in the moment and just be, and also knew his lines. He could do the blocking. He could do takes repetitively. It was really remarkable, and he's a great kid, and that was a, I felt really glad to have had that experience and to know him.
You mind if I ask you a couple others?
Sure.
Merritt Weaver, who plays Nicole's sister.
Yeah, Cassie, who's blotting the envelope with her perspiration. Yeah, I mean, she's fantastic. She was in Greenberg, played Greta's friend Gina in Greenberg, and I told her one of the best line readings I've ever had in a movie, and it was in Greenberg actually, which was, Greta was leaving a message for her friend. She's in the car. I think Paul McCartney's Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey is playing, and Greta's leaving the message, but it's one of those automated messages that says like it's a thing, and so where you could just say your name. You remember that they used to have those like on cell phones, like so you just say it was like the person you can, it's not here, whatever, and then the thing, and then she goes, Gina, just like like the name that just sort of appears out of nowhere, I just love that. So and I've always wanted to find something again for Merritt. I mean, Merritt, if you haven't seen Merritt's acceptance speech for her first Emmy of the 2 Emmys she's won, for Nurse Jackie, it's a YouTube great. It's up there with the Olivia Colmans, and she can do everything. I mean, she's on Netflix show, Netflix limited whatever series. What do we call them? Now called Unbelievable, I think, and she's just fantastic, and it's a totally different thing. And she came in. She read for the scene. And I think maybe the best audition I've ever had and witnessed ever, which is, and basically she just did what you see in the movie with what Cassie does, and she's one of those people you hope you have a role for all the time.
So last one is Martha Kelly, who plays the observer, the evaluator. Yes, you know who I mean.
Yeah. That was just a ghost. That yeah, came. We never knew who that was. No. Yeah, I've been asked a lot if that's a real evaluator. She actually, when she came in, I realized how difficult it was going to be to cast that part because how unique and great she was. Because I realized that it would have been, it's like in seeing her do it, that was like it could only be done this way. And if I hadn't seen that, and I did read some other people and some good people, but it was very hard for anybody to not comment on anything. And she somehow could. And what's great about Martha, she's so smart and funny, and she kind of is that, but also knows what she's doing, which is what you want. And so she and Merritt actually both have a thing that they do sometimes, though, while you're shooting, where they'll say a line while the cameras roll, like you're shooting the scene, actually shooting it. And they'll say the line, and they'll go. And I just break it to both of them. We can still, the scene is still going on. You know, like you're still in it. You can, if you comment on your own performance, yeah, it's not. We can't use that.
Breaking, a lot of breaking of the fourth wall.
Yeah. It's just that feeling of missed it.
Damn it.
Yeah. But it's because they both really care.
So I just have two questions. I want to turn it over to the audience. But one is that, of course, it brings to mind other divorce movies, but I don't want to ask you about the obvious one, which is Kramer versus Kramer, but instead about Shoot the Moon, which is a film I haven't seen since it came out, but I have fond memories of. I remember thinking it was a really smart film, especially the script and the performances by Albert Finney and Diane Keaton. Do you have that impression too? Do you remember? Did you see it for this film, or did it stay with you when it came out?
I didn't watch it for this movie, but it's a movie I also have really good memories of, and I did watch it again a few years ago, and it's a really tough movie but in a very real way, and it's very moving. Extremely well cast. It has Karen Allen and Peter Weller are in like the new boyfriends and girlfriends. The kids are great in it. It's Alan Parker directed it. It's yeah, Bo Goldman wrote it. It's really good. I think it's got that kind of Mill Valley mist in it too. You know, but it's tough. I guess I can see why at the time anyway it was sort of less well known, because you have to be, you know, it's a challenge in a way, and but I think it's a beautiful movie.
So the reason I'm asking is that I came across a quotation of Albert Finney's about playing the role of George in that film, and it seemed interesting to me, which is that quote. He said, "It required personal acting. I had to dig into myself. When you have to expose yourself and use your own vulnerability, you can get a little near the edge. Scenes where Diane Keaton and I really have to go at each other reminded me of times when my own behavior had been monstrous." Do you find that happens with actors much? I mean, it's striking to me that, you know, most people say it's called acting. You're acting. You don't actually, you're not that raw and vulnerable. But do you find in scenes like the one that you did so beautifully between them?
Yeah, in this movie I really did, and that's, I mean, I had never read that. I'd like to give that to Adam and Scarlett, actually. Yeah, I felt exactly that from them. You know, those scenes felt so personal, and to the degree that it was both harder for me because I really saw what, you know, I felt for them because they were bringing so much of themselves to it, but I also felt so gratified, and also I can watch it in a way that I can't often watch my own movies because it feels like personal, like in the way he describes. It feels like theirs. And yeah, I mean, the scene where they have their fight in his LA apartment, which we shot over 2 days, was the first time I've had that experience as a director where I felt too affected by what was happening in a way that I had to stop. I mean, they were also exhausted. They would have to take breaks anyway, but I had to take breaks because I couldn't judge it. I had to like step away from it. I felt like I was really watching people have this fight, and but it was also the most gratifying scene that I've been involved with because for that same reason, which is that it was so personal, and they were giving so much of themselves and so unafraid in that way. You know, I find, and I would imagine Alan Parker was similar. I mean, it was, you know, everything was very precisely blocked out, scripted, so that I think it gave them the freedom within those boundaries.
So the last question I wanted to ask you is about theater. A couple of your previous films, you make allusion to theater. It seems to me that Mistress America, people have likened to screwball comedy, but I actually think it's more to do with its 17th century predecessor, Restoration comedy. And here's a film which is literally about the theater, about stage. And I'm curious to know what your feeling is about theater and the difference between theater and film, not the obvious differences, but just specifically, let's say, for example, about acting. And whether you have ever had any interest in doing theater, like the person who you make allusion to in the film, which is Ingmar Bergman, who had as much illustrious career on stage as he did on screen. So talk a little bit about theater for you.
Right, or Mike Nichols, who's also referenced. Well, interestingly, I didn't go to a lot of theater growing up. My parents were very interested in movies, but we didn't. I think partly because it was it was more expensive. But you know, like early, I think Pirates of Penzance was the first play I went to, and then it was like Cats, and you know. But when I got a little bit older, I started to see, like I saw Fool for Love with Ed Harris, but I actually don't really. I love theater. I go a lot now, but I don't see it the way I see movies. I don't like when I watch a play. I don't have any real. I don't feel like I know what they're doing really. I mean, I don't have like a movies. It's much more. It's just intuitive to me. I sort of view. It's just something I just understand. I understand that language, and I understand it when I'm seeing another movie. And in theater, I don't. So I love it, but I feel sort of outside of it in a way.
So we have time for a few questions. I'm sorry, we have a mic going around, so if you could just wait a second.
So I think it's better to get divorced in New York than in LA. Talk about how you developed your insights into the divorce process of Los Angeles and how that reflected on your own vision of Los Angeles. It seemed very apocalyptic in a certain way.
Well, let's not blame Los Angeles. I just came back from Los Angeles. I had to be very nice about it there. Here we know where we're. Well, I did a lot of research for the movie, and I did a lot of research both just in terms on the sort of, you know, stuff that went into the characters and to the story development, the emotional story development, talking to people who've gone through divorces, and also people who've been married a long time. I felt like, in a sense, I mean, the movie's about, it's a love story, essentially. It didn't, you know, the fact that it ends or doesn't end, it didn't really change things in terms of the sort of the core of the movie. But I then also interviewed many lawyers and California lawyers and judges and mediators, and I would give them scenarios and get their thoughts of what would you say here, and they would tell me about other cases and things that they went through, and that would all help me and inform how I, you know, how I told that part of the story.
Have you had to do much research in previous films?
I mean, I have for different things, but in this one, because there was so much, there was the sort of story hinged on legal, you know, that was different, I suppose.
Where's the mic? Yeah.
Hi, I'm a really big fan of you. I was wondering if you could go more into your connection with the musical company.
Did you hear the question? It had to do with Sondheim's company.
Yeah, well, that was actually something that Adam Driver and I have been talking about for a while. We've just our love of that musical, and we even talked about once at some point maybe like, is there a movie of Company? And we had talked about that, and in that discussion, I kind of got into my head, well, Adam's got to sing Being Alive and something. And if I couldn't have worked it into this movie, it would be in my next movie. I mean, there's a version of answering this question where I tell you I just reverse engineered the whole movie to get Adam to sing that song, which is partly true even. I mean, but it was a thing and a note I had, and I was hoping I would arrive at a movie that would fit in. And not only would it fit in as entertainment, but as story, you know, the way it plays in a, you know, the way great musicals numbers work is that they tell the story, they give you more character. The character's in a different place at the end of the song than they are in the beginning of the song. And because he was in theater, the character, that gave me an opportunity also. And then I thought, well, then Nicole should have a song too. And it should be from the same musical, because in a sense, it's like they're speaking to each other, but they don't know it. So that's sort of where it initially came from. And we shot it at the Knickerbocker, which it's down on University and 12th Street, and where I've gone, and we don't live far from there. We go and see jazz, and our neighbor plays jazz there sometimes, and it just had it was a great vibe that day. Just it's the only time the camera moves unmotivated. So there's 2 times the camera moves not motivated by physical action in the movie. You know, the camera moves a lot because people move a lot in the movie. But when Scarlett tells her monologue, her story to Nora, and the camera pushes in on her, and then when Adam sings that song, the camera moves in on him, and it's because something I always felt like, it's a thing I always look for, like when I'm making a movie, is like when the rules break themselves, you know, because you have sense of like something has shifted, something emotionally is changing inside them, and the camera can't help but push in, and you kind of feel it at the time. It's like, and it's like something that emotionally has changed or psychologically has changed in the characters that gives freedom to the cinema of it, and that's exciting to me.
Thank you for this masterpiece. I've seen this twice already.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about your wardrobe and styling choices for Scarlett.
Could you say that again?
Your wardrobe and styling, her hair, the way she dressed, your choices for her image.
The question is about Scarlett's wardrobe and her styling. Well, Mark Bridges, who's the costume designer who I'd worked together with on Greenberg, who's wonderful. He did Phantom Thread. He works with Paul Thomas Anderson a lot, and he, I think he won an Oscar for The Artist as well. I mean, a lot of it was, we had a very strong palette. In terms of color, we had this sort of notion of our palette both throughout the whole movie. And because a lot of those locations in the middle of the movie are, by design, these sort of transitional spaces and often sort of sterile. I mean, Nora's office has more kind of her personality, but it's still a professional space. It's not home. And so we thought a lot about the people in these spaces. And so I'm thinking of, I say this in reference to Scarlett, like her, when she delivers that, when she goes to see Nora, she has this sort of gray shirt that with that sort of semi-white cream background of Nora's, which has these long lines, and her shirt had this texture that we loved. And she almost fades into the wall, but then she has her hair kind of takes her out, and it really frames her face. And because that whole monologue is all her, I felt like, well, let's almost like almost have her come out. I mean, because the story is sort of her coming into herself in some way and coming out of herself. So that was something we were very conscious of. Her hair, I loved, we looked at Persona a lot, the Bergman movie, because we love the framing of the faces in that movie. And it's also great, I mean, it has great close-ups, but it also has great sort of these two women in relationship to each other all the time. So there's a lot of like overlapping faces and people in their spaces. And the movie our movie, not unlike that movie, has a kind of, there's a sort of internal, external thing going on in the movie a lot, both in terms of the literal spaces they're in. They're in New York and they're in LA and everybody's talking about the space, but we're always inside. You see the space is always out the window somewhere out of reach. It's not really to that last shot where you see the space is available in some way. And it's also something so that I feel like when you're on their faces, and those actors giving so much, there's something so interior. You feel like you can, if not read their minds, you can project so much onto what they're thinking, and that's this sort of inner life. But then we see them in these big offices or out in a, mini mall and, two-tiered mini mall in LA, of which there are many, with the 99-cent store sign, and or Adam in Times Square, and so a lot of the sort of discussion about how people's look and wardrobe and everything, it starts with the characters. We thought very much about who they were, and it starts there, and then we kind of expand it to these sort of either notions of palette, color, and then sort of thematic ideas.
Was a short haircut like a sense of her being a feminist?
Not deliberately, but I was going to say I love B.B. Anderson's haircut in Persona, and it looks a little bit like that if you've seen that movie.
We have time for two more. Carson's passing the mic.
But I will say that I always wanted to do a thing where somebody remarks on something, a change in somebody that has already happened. And that's in the movie, is that she dyes her hair, when she goes to LA, but he sees her and he doesn't say anything. It's not till the second time that he sees her that he says something. Anyway, I always wanted to do that because I feel like often people don't remark on physical appearance right away. It takes them a second. So anyway, or like you think about it, but you don't say it, and then you mean, oh, I never asked them about that. Yeah, and then you say it the next time.
Hi. Real quickly, we just saw Merritt Weaver in that incredible Netflix series, Unbelievable. So it was really a jolt to see her. Here's acting, I guess. But just two quick questions. First, what do you imagine the series that Nicole was in was like? And actually, more importantly, the scene where Charlie accidentally cuts his arm is like where did that come from? It was just so off the wall and so great. And I'm just curious as how you came up with that.
Well, fortunately for me, I only have to come up with as much of the series as you see in the in the movie. So there was a kind of vague idea about a plant invasion. We actually we actually shot a piece which we cut from the movie, which was Nicole directing a scene from the show, and it involved these vines. We designed this whole. It was actually pretty great. It was. You'd be interested. You'd like this because it's. I'm changing my answer in the middle because I actually am thinking, no, actually we came up with more of this show. It was kind of inspired. My friend Gregory Crutzen, who is a wonderful photographer and does these kind of amazing, sort of, I don't know, they're very suggestive kind of dark pictures, and but they feel kind of like movies too. So we had this sort of cross section of a house, and we had these vines coming up, and we had our choreographer, a man named David Newman, who's he actually choreographed Hadestown. He's just was nominated for a Tony, and he's done great. He's great. Also, just shows himself sort of dance, but he's really remarkable. And he helped with a lot of our choreography, both sort of more straightforward stuff like Nicole and singing her song with Julie and Merritt. But he also played the guy, and our idea was that it was shot and then reversed afterwards. So they did it backwards because then they were going to run it backwards so it would go in real time. You know what I mean? Like in Twin Peaks when they talk. So anyway, I don't know. This is. You're all welcome to leave while I finish this. Anyway, he did this remarkable thing of coming alive, but the whole thing was he was getting sucked down by the plant, but he does it in reverse. It was great. What was the other? What's that? Yeah, Netflix would yeah, they would be good. Slicing his arm. Well, I felt like when I was working on it that and I look for this throughout the movie when I was working on it, if what's a sort of physical manifestation of what's going on here? On one hand, it's also like when Charlie's in a state, he's lost, he's not himself quite, and those stupid things that we all do when we're like too tired or too like you've been so busy thinking about something else, and then you just do something stupid, and you can't. I always feel like when I'm like jet lagged or something, like you end up like spilling the coffee on your shirt, whatever it is, and so, I felt like that there was an aspect to him at that point where that seemed part of it, but I also thought that it was a way to bring forth something that was going on inside. I think the story, in a sense, one way of describing the movie is, it's the story for Nicole, it's the story of her kind of building herself up, finding her voice. And for Charlie, it's the story of breaking down, which is kind of their tragedy, in that they're always missing each other. And they're at different places at different times. And that was a way of dramatizing this slow breakdown that he's going through, which is also necessary.
One of the main takeaways for me of the film is that you should never go to a couples therapist with multiple finger rings. I think that's pretty telling sign that you're not in good hands, as it were. Sorry. I want to thank Noah so much, and I want to thank you all.
Thank
for
you,
coming.
Josh. Thank you, everybody.